Early in the 19th century, Romanticism reached its peak. Unlike the neoclassicists, who promoted order and reason, the Romantics believed in the power of the imagination, emotion, and individualism. Much of their work focused on the past but was typically set in the Middle Ages rather than classical antiquity. They also created a distinctive form of landscape painting in which the forces of nature were seen as an extension of feelings and were often given a mystical, visionary role. 19th, 1800, 1825. Romanticism 1790 to 1850. Nazarenes 1809 to 1830. Neoclassicism c. 1750-1820s. Edo period, Japan 1615 to 1868. Around the middle of the 19th century, realism emerged in France as a reaction against French academic art. Instead of tackling noble themes, realist artists painted the harsh conditions of rural life. In England, the pre-Raphaelites tried to return to the simplicity of early Italian painting. Inspired by the work of the realists and Japanese woodblock prints, the Impressionists strove to capture the fleeting impressions of light in everyday scenes, using quick brush strokes and flecks of pure color. The Neo and Post-Impressionists developed this technique, hoping to express feelings and ideas by distorting shapes and experimenting with color, line, and perspective. Rejecting naturalism, the Nabi simplified forms and used flat areas of color to capture the essence of objects. Towards the end of the century, the symbolists created evocative, dreamlike works derived from literature or legends. Art Nouveau took symbolist imagery, such as sinuous lines based on plant forms and pale, seductive women, and used it primarily for decorative effect. Century 1875, 1900. Realism 1850 to 1900. Pre-Raphaelites 1848 c. 1910. French academic art 1840 to 1900. Meiji era, Japan 12,868 to 1912. Impressionism 1870 to 1900. Neo-Impressionism 1885 to 1900. Post-Impressionism 1880 c. 1905. Nabi 1890 to 1900. Symbolism 1885 to 1910. 1900 2,380 inches. Art Nouveau 1890 to 1914. Romanticism was a multi-layered movement that took many forms and affected most branches of the arts. It began in the late 18th century and flowered most fully in the early years of the following century. Origins and influences. One strain of Romanticism took its name from the old romances, the colorful tales of chivalry and honor that circulated in the Middle Ages. The term romantic was used very loosely to conjure up this nostalgic view of the past, and it gained added force with the revival of the Gothic style in architecture. In the late 18th century, a group of German authors began to use the term in a different sense, as the antithesis of classicism. While the core values of classicism were reason and order, the Romantics laid greater emphasis on the power of the imagination, the emotions, and individualism. These qualities could be evoked in very different ways. Some painters, for example, like to show the individual dwarfed by the forces of nature. At the same time, individualism can also be linked with the spirit of rebellion that epitomizes the Romantic era. This manifested itself in popular uprisings against the state and in the spread of new nationalist movements. Style and techniques. In France, the contest between Romanticism and Classicism was, to some degree, a confrontation of different styles. The Romantics led Songs of Innocence. William Blake. The title page from Blake's celebrated book of poems, printed in 1789, bears the hallmarks of the Romantic style. Romanticism. Timeline. The seeds of Romanticism were sown in the 1780s, when the French Revolution epitomized the spirit of rebellion. By 1800, Goya had made a series of prints entitled Los Caprichos, while in 1810 the Nazarenes moved to Rome. The movement reached its peak around 1820, when Géricault and Constable produced their finest works. Cole settled in the Hudson River Valley in 1836, while Turner's most daring pictures date from the early 1840s. 1781, Fuseli, The Nightmare. 1794, Blake, The Ancient Sea. 1800 of Days. 1800, Goya, The Naked Maja. 1811-13, Overbeck, The Adoration of the Kings. 1815, Constable Boat Building. Schools. Perhaps more than any other movement, Romanticism developed along very different lines from country to country. French. In France, more than anywhere else, Romanticism was seen as the direct antithesis of classicism. During the 1820s, in particular, reviewers of the exhibitions at the Salon placed Delacroix and Ingres in opposing camps. Traditionalists despised the former, not only for his style, but also for his choice of subjects. They attacked his depictions of the nationalist uprising in Greece, for example, deeming the topic more suitable for journalists than painters, and they were equally appalled by his alleged tendency of lingering on the goriest details in his pictures. In reality, the boundary between the two styles was rather blurred. Delacroix was a great admirer of tradition, while Ingres chose some themes, most notably, his harem paintings, that were decidedly romantic in spirit. Spanish. Spanish Romanticism is dominated by Goya, whose work is powerful and highly individual. This is exemplified in his pioneering depictions of warfare, which concentrate on the suffering of individuals, rather than on any glory that might be achieved. Goya also often focused on the darker side of the human psyche, tackling themes that dealt with madness, superstition, the supernatural, and the macabre. This was most evident in his graphic work, particularly in the set of prints entitled Los Caprichos. For subsequent generations, though, it is the black paintings, produced in old age, that typify Goya's romantic leanings. These nightmarish visions decorated the walls of his own house and were not revealed to the public until 1878. German. Although they enjoyed only limited success in their time, Caspar David Friedrich and Philipp Otto Runge now stand out as the two leading German romantic painters, with Friedrich in particular regarded as one of the giants of the time. He shared some of the attributes of his compatriots. His paintings are steeped in religious belief, and he also betrayed a similar taste for medievalism, as can be seen in his pictures of cowled monks and ruined abbeys. The wounded cuirassier Théodore Géricault having achieved his breakthrough with the charging cuirassier. This picture, exhibited by Géricault 2 years later, was less popular, as it signaled Napoleon's impending defeat. 1814, oil on canvas, 358 by 294 centimeters, Louvre, Paris, France. Morning, Philipp Otto Runge, the only completed section of Runge's Times of Day series. According to his poetic definition, morning is the limitless illumination of the universe. 1808, oil on canvas, 109 by 89 centimeters, Kunsthalle, Hamburg, Germany. By Eugène Delacroix, were powerful colorists and often produced work that seemed sketchy and unfinished to their opponents. In contrast, the classical camp, headed by Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, regarded sound draftsmanship and a highly detailed, enamel-like finish as the most important aspects of art. This division of opinion was evident elsewhere. One of J.M.W. Turner's storm scenes, for instance, was famously likened to a mass of soapsuds and whitewash. These attitudes, however, were by no means universal. In Germany, for example, the Nazarenes developed a style that may have focused on the past, but was far closer to the academic norm. Subjects. The Romantic approach lent itself to a very broad range of subjects. Its anti-rationalist overtones led artists to explore themes that were linked with horror, madness, violence, and the supernatural. There was also a taste for the exotic, as well as visionary, mystical ideas. Romantic artists often produced historical or legendary scenes, but generally set these in the Middle Ages, rather than in the ancient times. They also developed a distinctive form of landscape painting. Classical artists reshaped nature to suit their ordered compositions, but the Romantics portrayed it as wild and ungovernable. The Witch's Sabbath. Francisco de Goya. His witch paintings were often inspired by popular plays. 1797-98, oil on canvas, 43 by 31 cm, Museo Lázaro Galdiano, Madrid, Spain. Current events. 1805. Following the Battle of Trafalgar, King George IV commissions Turner to paint a picture celebrating the victory. 1808-14. The Spanish Peninsular War leads Francisco de Goya to produce 65 etchings depicting the horrors of war. He also continues painting portraits, including that of Joseph Bonaparte during the French occupation. 1821-32. The Greek War of Independence. Delacroix's painting on this subject wins the Gold Medal at Paris Salon in 1824. 1818. Friedrich, The Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog. 1819. Géricault, The Raft of the Medusa. 1821. Constable, The Hay Wain. 1830. Delacroix, Liberty Leading the People. 1839. Turner, The Fighting Temeraire Tugged to Her Last Berth to Be Broken Up.
Duran Shandaken, Ridge, Kingston, New York.
However, his attitude to nature was far more original, and there is an indissoluble link between the physical and the spiritual worlds. His human figures seem small and insignificant compared with the vast panoramas that stretch out before their eyes, but they can find redemption if they can recognize the symbols of Christian salvation that lie all around them. Nazarenes. The Romantic movement in Germany was led by the Nazarenes. Contemporary critics believed that the Nazarenes were responsible for the rebirth of German art, although they conceded that much of their work was focused on the past. This was most obvious from their attempts to revive the art of fresco painting and to mimic the lifestyle of the painter-monks from the early Renaissance. In some ways, these aims found a parallel in William Morris's efforts to reproduce the most positive aspects of the medieval guild system. The Nazarenes were also closely linked with the upsurge of nationalist sentiments in Germany. This led some of their members to portray patriotic themes from German history and legend. British Romantics. In Britain, too, landscapes provided some of the most potent examples of Romantic art. In their very different ways, Turner and John Martin portrayed the terrible beauty of nature, when the full force of its powers was unleashed. The Romantic aspects of John Constable's work are more subtle. In his canvases, nature becomes an extension of his feelings, echoing William Wordsworth's definition of poetry as emotion recollected in tranquility. Visionaries. No artist produced a more extreme form of Romanticism than William Blake. His hatred of rationalism is evident from his pictures of authoritarian figures wielding compasses, while his individualism is highlighted in his strange, personal mythologies. Blake revered the imagination, but he was also deeply religious. Samuel Palmer, too, was very pious, though in a more restrained manner. Even in a visionary picture, such as the Magic Apple Tree, see left, the composition is centered around a church spire. American Romantics. In America, the spirit of Romanticism shone brightest in the landscapes of the Hudson River School. Headed by Thomas Cole and Asher B. Durand, this influential group of artists celebrated the unspoilt beauties of their native land. Hadley Castle. John Constable. This melancholy masterpiece was painted when Constable's wife was dying. 1829, oil on canvas, 122 x 165 centimeters, Yale Center for British Art, Paul Mellon Collection, U.S. The Magic Apple Tree, Samuel Palmer. The enormous crop of apples and the flock of plump, healthy sheep are signs of God's bounty. C. 1830, brown ink and watercolor, 17 by 28 cm, Fitzwilliam Museum, Cambridge, UK.